like to go ahead and welcome everybody. Thank you for everybody tuning in. This is the Technology and Innovation webinar, The Path to Development in Africa, presented by DOWA, Doing Good Work in Africa. I'll be your moderator for today. My name is Oche Bridgeford, also known as Oche Igboy, also known as Casey Bridgeford. Got a few different names, but I am very happy to be here today, and we have a very exciting panel to discuss some of the great things that are happening on the African continent. Just some housekeeping rules. We want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. If you have any questions, we have a Q&A session where you can drop your questions anytime throughout the webinar. So you can go ahead and drop any questions that you have for any of the panelists that we have speaking today, as well as myself as a moderator. I'd like to thank you once again for tuning in. This is sure to be an exciting and engaging conversation about some very interesting things that are happening on the African continent. So today we will start. I will welcome everyone and we'll get into introductions of each of our speakers. They'll have an opportunity to tell you a little bit about the work that they do, and then we will transition to our panel discussion and our live Q&A. And then we will close and have a few takeaways for everyone for today. So once again, my name is Oche Bridgeford. I join you today from Pennsylvania, though I am a first generation Nigerian here in the United States. My father came here for work. In my work here in the United States, I have worked with the Wharton Social Impact Initiative and the Wharton School as they developed their process of working with the African continent. I also was a part of the Wharton Africa Business Forum, the longest running business forum in the United States on Africa. I've also had the opportunity to work with a number of startups and entrepreneurs across the continent through my company OnCast Media, in which we built a mobile app to connect entrepreneurs with critical business content so that they could launch and scale their endeavors and their ventures. I also am an advisor with Funema, which is an alternative investment firm that invests in last mile entrepreneurs across the continent. And I am very happy to be a part of this discussion and being invited by DOWA. DOWA is an organization that works to pair individuals who are interested in working in Africa with top entrepreneurs on the continent to help build capacity in their ventures. So once again, we'd like to thank everybody for being here. And today's topic and today's discussion is going to be about technology and innovation. As we know, Africa is not only what's next, Africa is what's now. Even as we see the world being ravaged by one of the biggest tragedies that we've seen in our modern time, Africa as a whole is striving to overcome the COVID virus in a way that even the United States is struggling to do. Though we have outbreaks in South Africa, as well as a number of places around the globe, the continent is finding ways to continue operating, continue moving through even the coronavirus. And part of that is due to technology and its use of technology. So in today's discussion, we will be talking to a number of different entrepreneurs who have built ventures on the continent to make life better for themselves and their communities. I will start by introducing you to our first panelist, which is Wainright Acquoi. Wainright is a Liberian social entrepreneur working to reimagine the future of secondary education and prepare students for a future of work. He is the CEO of Tribe, an education social enterprise on a mission to develop a new generation of purpose-driven young problem solvers, entrepreneurs, innovators, and storytellers. Wainright previously worked for the African Leadership Group in San Francisco and High Conversion, a Florida-based tech company. He's a Watson Social Entrepreneurship Scholar, an Acumen Rockefeller Student Social Innovator, and Yali RLC Fellow. Our next panelist that I want to speak about is Nneile Nkholise, who was born in South Africa. She studies physics at the University of Wits and has studied mechanical engineering at Central University of the Free State. She's a mechanical engineering technologist with years of experience in the construction and biomedical sectors. She's developed biomedical products ranging from prosthesis to bioimplants. And she was the founder of ai.minohealth, a biotech company specializing in custom-made medical solutions using CAD and CAM techniques. In 2018, she co-founded 3Demo, a venture-backed company that automates livestock data analytics to monitor livestock health. In 2016, she was recognized as Africa's top female innovator by the World Economic Forum. She was awarded the South African Youth of the Year by the Office of the Presidency in 2017. And by 2018, she was awarded Forbes Africa's 30 Under 30. In that same year, she was inducted as a Harambee Entrepreneurship Class Fellow, where she worked with both Cisco and Oppenheimer generations. Our last panelist that I want to introduce you to is Darlington Akogo. Darlington is a global leader in the field of AI. He is the founder and director of artificial intelligence at Gudra and its subsidiaries MinoHealth, MinoHealth AI Labs, karaAgro AI, Runmila AI Institute, and Gudra AI Studio. Akogo is involved in AI and tech across several platforms and industries. He's the lead of the topic group of AI for radiology under the United Nations International Telecommunication Union and the World Health Organization's focus group on artificial intelligence for health. Akogo leads the development of global regulations and standards for AI and radiology. He's also an advisory member and ambassador to West Africa at AI Expo Africa, the largest business-focused AI community in Africa. We are very happy to have our panelists, but not only do we have great panelists that we'll be speaking to today, we also have a special presentation from Miss Winnie Okello. Winnie is a civil and environmental engineer by training and has worked both in public and private sectors. She served on leadership boards of various nonprofit organizations and recently launched an entrepreneurship venture under Winnie O Media, LLC. Ms. Okello founded several web platforms, including AfricaEngineeringNews.com and harassment and assault reporting platform, with the purpose of educating and increasing awareness in topics ranging from engineering in the global context to cosmetics and e-commerce. Her areas of professional competency include environmental regulatory compliance, water resources, recycling, sustainability, program development, and management. And she is very passionate about community development and empowerment, youth mentoring, and network building. So we would like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, as well as Winnie Okello. Now, I have a few questions that I'd like to jump into with our panelists. The first question is, what drew you to your venture? When did you know that it was time for you to start your venture, and what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And we will start with addressing that to Nneile first.
Well, the first person. Hi, Oche. Thank you so much for the introduction. It was a great introduction. Well, for me, it's more of I was trying to solve my own problem, particularly talking about my recent startup, BDEMO, working in the agricultural space. When COVID hit, I was home for quite a while, and I had to interact quite a lot with farmers. And one of the things that I understood a lot was that a lot of the farmers were dealing with diseased livestock, which was affecting a lot of their business and also ability to produce at their farm. And, it was more drawn to saying if this thing spreads out quite quickly, what would be the impact that would create for the farming industry? And also, what would it create for the economy? Because we had come from the backlog of serious livestock diseases in South Africa, and they quite affected the economy immensely. And with a country that's dependent on livestock quite a lot, and coming from a continent where almost all the 54 countries are dependent on livestock, it's more of I was driven by that. But to me, in all the startups that I've worked in, I'm a tech. What drove me into it was solving one person's problem and starting to realize that it's not just that person who has that problem. There are many more people that has a problem.
In Venture Burn, you were featured about your entrepreneurial endeavors, and especially this one with 3Demo. Your technology, is it called Tola?
Yes, Tola.
So can you talk a little bit about what that technology does? Because I know you were first looking at implementing that in the sports arena, but you transitioned from sports to agriculture.
Oh,
So
okay.
what exactly does that technology do?
So what we have built was a way on using infrared imagery to be able to detect health abnormalities. So how we used to apply it in sports was that we're able to detect injuries, because normally when an athlete has an injury at a specific location in the body, be it a muscle injury or either a torn muscle or probably a dislocation, there's always a high temperature around that region. So we are then able to locate it in that way, and it's easier for us to then do regional segmentation, and the medical doctor in the team can be able to locate where the athlete might have high stress, contact stress that could denote it's an injury. But as time went by, we started realizing that the greatest potential of our technology could be in agriculture, because a lot of, just like how we dealt with COVID, using infrared cameras where we can tell when someone has high temperature, it's also the same with livestock. So whenever an animal has a high fever or has some health abnormalities, the temperature would usually go high. But what's interesting when we do it with livestock is that we determine where the temperature is, the location of the temperature. So when the location of a temperature is at this particular point, we can tell what that animal's health condition could be. So sometimes, say, when the temperature is around the stomach, it's either they have bloating, or sometimes an animal could be pregnant. When the temperature is around the nose and the hoofs at the same time, it could be a foot and mouth disease risk. So that's how we transition the technology from sports into agriculture.
Wow, wow, wow. That's amazing. With you working with infrared technology, that is shown that you can use already established technology in a new application to solve new problems. Um, we also have another panelist that is with us, another speaker that's with us that is using another technology to solve everyday problems.
So we use AI in healthcare and agriculture mainly. So in healthcare, basically what we are doing with AI is that we are developing this automated systems that can be able to detect or diagnose diseases. And so how this basically works is, take for example radiology. So this is the space where you take medical images through these devices like X-ray, MRI, and then if you capture these medical images, you have an expert that will look at the image and then determine if any disease is present. So you can use this to detect chest-related diseases like pneumonia, or it could even be the detection of breast cancer using mammography. So the issue, however, is that there are limited radiologists globally, but even more so when you look at Africa, there are very, very few radiologists. So in Ghana, you have few years ago, it was just a few, I think about 30, and currently the number has increased to somewhere around 70. In certain places like Liberia, it's said that they have like just about two radiologists, which is almost hard to believe. But even if you look at South Africa, which is developed, you have one radiologist for every 100,000 people. So the issue there is that if you can't have human experts, you can't have doctors do this, what about having tech solutions do this? But it's quite rigorous to do this, except if you're using something like AI. So basically what we did was that we collected a lot of medical images, built these systems that are able to learn from the medical images, learn what diseases look like across hundreds and thousands of medical images until they're able to detect these diseases on their own. So after doing that, there's a whole lot of rigorous testing that we've been engaging in, making sure that we are following regulatory guidelines and everything. So yeah, that's what we've been doing in healthcare. In agriculture too, is just taking that technology and then applying it in some sense to plants. So plants also develop diseases. They also battle with pests, especially. And so we develop AI solutions that on one application, you just take a photo of the plant leaf. If there are any funny patches on it, then our AI system called karaAgro AI is able to analyze those patches and then tell you what disease is present and then recommend a solution. Beyond that, we also have AI and drone precision agriculture solutions. We do what is called high throughput phenotyping. So the whole point of this is just to ensure that there are also issues in agriculture. Food security is a major issue in Africa, and we want to improve on-farm productivity. We want to help farmers be able to deal with diseases and pests and other issues that come up on the field. If they're able to do this, then they can then boost their yield. So that is what we are doing. And with high throughput phenotyping, we are helping plant breeders develop new varieties of crops, especially say groundnut. So we can develop varieties that are as much as 10 times more efficient than what the average farmer already uses in Africa. So that is an extreme boost in yield.
Thank you. And so it's clear the use case for your technology. Who are your customers, or who is purchasing this technology?
So with karaAgro currently, basically everyone. So if you're looking at plant breeders, if you're looking at seed producers, if you're looking at farmers, mainly the medium to large scale farmers, but then currently those who our technology appeals to the most in agriculture happens to be the plant breeders. They already have a lot of interest when it comes to data and being able to have access to this insight. So we've been doing a lot of work. We've worked with basically most of the majority of plant breeders in Ghana. We also work with medium to large scale farmers, but then the reality is that in Ghana, for example, there are not that many medium to large scale farmers. They are riddled with all kinds of issues. The technology will help them address that issue, but historically, that whole space has had a lot of bad problems that will take a while to address. In healthcare, our main focus right now is not even so much making any profits yet. We are taking the same approach of how before a medicine is then approved and sold, you need to have a lot of clinical trials. You need to be able to systematically say that you've done several trials across thousands of samples, and you've done control trials, and all of it is leading to the results that points to the fact that this works. And the reason for this is that if you're developing health tech solution, like let's say electronic medical recording system is one thing, but if you want to build a solution that is supposed to then be between the healthcare delivery value chain, to the extent that you can see that a radiologist, which is extremely important, even when they are not present, the solution can work on its own to then decide if someone has some condition or not. You need to be concrete. You need to be able to concretely point out that that is the case. So that's basically what connects us to the United Nations work too as well. So globally, this is something that is kind of all over the place. We know clinical trials for medicine, we know electronic medical recording system, but AI in healthcare is still very new and the regulatory framework is not truly there. And so with the United Nations, basically as we are testing our AI system, we are developing these methods of rigorously testing the system. We are also turning it into global standards that can be used by others across the world.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And jumping right into the idea of continually learning and continually putting into practice what you're learning, I would like to now go to Wainright. I know that Wainright is a social entrepreneur, but you're also building a platform for social entrepreneurs around the world. Can you please talk about your work and what drew you into it?
Sure, thank you. It's hard to speak after wonderful, amazing people like Darlington and Nneile, but I will try. So basically, I think, it's really a combination of different stages in my life and different factors. Growing up in Liberia, of course, after a long period of civil war, you realize that there are just so many systems that were broken. And as a person who I deeply love my country and I really, hope that I can live there. But at the same time, how do we live in a place that is, of course, providing more comfort for people and ensuring that young people are realizing their full potential? And I think, you heard Darlington, you heard Nneile spoke very amazing about the work they do. And the work we want to do at Trap is really ensuring that how do we create more of Darlingtons and more of Nneile in Liberia and across the continent, because Africa has a really rich potential. And Darlington mentioned that there are only two radiologists in Liberia, which is true. And even another devastating fact is that one of those two people, is not a Liberian. And so imagine a country where there is just a lot of potential, human potential and natural resources, but we don't have the human capital to invest into these resources and ensure that we are creating prosperity and economic growth for people and society is very, is a very scary approach to how we live in that society. And so that is why we believe that if we must actually realize the potential of the continent, right, which is really massive, then we need to really create an ecosystem where more and more young people are being educated and transitioning into the workforce to be the next innovators, the next technologists, the next entrepreneurs, and the next storytellers across the continent. But one thing that we realize is that mostly for when it comes to career development and workforce development, we are mostly focused on post-secondary institutions, and that is universities or just professional development institutions, and we overlook the potential of creating a foundation for young students who are leaving high school. And so there are many things that happen between the period of students who are leaving high school to when they become, when they transition to college or the workforce, is that when they don't learn the fundamentals of what career development should be, or if they don't create their passion from young ages, then most of these development come as a shock to them and they can't really sustain. Another thing is that they are afraid to really endeavor into risks, seeking adventures and innovations. And so I think we all know that when children are developing, they're very curious, they're excited, they're creative in ways. But oftentimes, we don't have the platform that help them cultivate these different skills or these different talents that they grew up with in high school. And now once they leave high school, it's almost difficult or nearly impossible to really, go after these kinds of talents and potential that they grew up with in their different countries and different spaces. And so that is why we want to really reimagine that secondary education space by really creating, innovative curriculums, digital solutions, right? Teaching young students from young ages things about AI, things about animation, things about digital technology, and there's so many more of these relevant skills that can really empower them to thrive in the workforce and really create the next important innovations that can, progress and sustain the growth and prosperity of the continent.
Thank you. Thank you, Wainright. I totally agree that we have to create spaces for us to essentially tinker. And many times that opportunity to tinker and come up with something new isn't provided when you don't have your primary resources that you need. So I applaud you in the work that you're doing for by developing a platform to strengthen others to do that same kind of social impact work. We have a special presentation by someone that I know here from the U.S. who has been doing work both in the U.S. as well as on the continent. And I would love for her to speak a little bit about the work that she's doing and things she's involved in. We're going to turn it over now to Winnie Okello.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? Happy Saturday. Thank you so much, Oche, for that awesome introduction. And it is a pleasure to join this esteemed group of speakers. I am already loving what I'm hearing. And yeah, I mean, as we know, oh, yes, please, I just asked, please start. Yeah. So, for those of you who are tuning in from wherever you are across the globe, first of all, welcome. And so if you really don't know, all right, the topic of conversation today is technology and innovation and the development of the continent as a whole, right? And oftentimes, folks tend to think of Africa as, we have that joke, you're talking about Africa, the country, or Africa, the continent, right? And so we have to get to the place where even though we are bridging towards, the unification of Africa and being able to, operate on the global scale as a cohesive unit, we still have to empower the individual nations and cultures and subcultures that exist in our various nations. And so in the big picture, when we're talking about the technology aspect, right, that is when we're dealing, I guess, with more of like the techie engineering aspect of things and applying the scientific knowledge and process to creating things that are helpful for the community. And, in order to have innovation or rather, in order to have better technology, we must allow people that space to innovate, right, and come up with ideas that are practical. Like you have to make the technical practical, which is exactly what our innovators are doing across the globe. And I'm also glad to hear that, our African folks across the diaspora, right, you're recognizing the fact that we have the opportunity to innovate. Like that is often something that's not really highlighted in the process of education. And so if we're going to be talking about the development, we have to tie in the innovation to the technological advancement in order for our nations to develop the way we are hoping Africa will look like 10, 20, 30 years to come next. So at the end of the day, we have to look for the silver lining and all the opportunities. And one of the big things I've been seeing, especially as I'm writing for, my Africa Engineering News platform, yay, like the big thing is the changes in telemedicine. If anything, the African continent has been leapfrogging developed nations in the fight against COVID. And because I was just recently there, the end of 2020, and I was immensely pleasantly surprised that, just from the transportation sector, aviation industry policies, Africa CDC has weekly, actually 2 webinars weekly that just provide updates on the status of, COVID pandemic response actions. And so at the end of the day, I believe Oche, you mentioned this, is we have to learn from the past to be able to innovate for the future, right? That's the trend where we have to really be keen about at the forefront of this movement, of this Africa Rising movement, as I like to call it, is we have to be mindful of where we've come from, right? Good, bad, ugly. We have to be mindful of where we're coming from to know where we're going as innovators, as scientists, as engineers, as creatives. And the purpose for that is to be able to provide context to specific solutions, right? And Kobo is a logistics company that I featured in Africa Engineering News recently. And I was just really impressed with how they pivoted within 3 years of their startup to providing real-time solutions that are actually beneficial, not only for their bottom line, but also for their employees, their drivers, on the street. So next, please. Yeah, so for us to do this, to get Africa to the path of progressive development and rapid and intentional development, right, we have to think outside the box. Somebody else previously mentioned, we have to allow our young folks coming up and even our youth, right, I usually check up on the unemployment rates. The youth in Kenya, I'm talking about Kenya specifically here, youth have the highest unemployment rate in the country, right? Are, 18 to mid 30s, highest unemployment rate. And that seems to be the consensus because a lot of them are working in the informal sector. And so if we are to see Africa developed into, the level, that is comparable to its, global market competitors, we need to think outside the box, right? And people have already been working in innovations regarding agribusiness, right? And agriculture, telemedicine. Telemedicine is huge, especially if we're going to be increasing access to those rural areas. One of the things I was checking on my website, and one of the most popular posts that I was writing for a while there was how Facebook was investing. Facebook and others like Facebook were heavily investing in bringing connectivity to the most rural parts of Africa. Do you think they're doing that just to be nice? No. There is money there. There is resources. There is great potential, and outsiders are tapping into the potential that exists currently in our motherland. And I think that's the biggest thing we really need to highlight. We need to be able to allow folks or encourage folks continue having these conversations that spark that interest in people to see that, oh, there's a lot going on in Africa, and we as Africans need to see that and value it and include that value-added process, in our resource management, so that others who are coming in from outside are not. Because I really hate when folks say, oh yeah, yes, Africa provides the natural resources, but we provide the value added. I'm like, fam, you won't be nothing without the resources coming from Africa. And so, at the end of the day, just, allow people to think outside the box and, provide solutions to your everyday issues, right? That's what innovation is about. Seeing a need and feeling that need. Next, please. Because at the end of the day, even though the focus right now is heavily on COVID, there has to be life after COVID, and there has to be that new normal after COVID, right? And so, if we're looking at how Africa is going to be transitioning in the innovative aspect, we could definitely expect a lot more leapfrogging, right? Especially as internet access becomes more of a utility than a luxury, especially in the rural parts of Africa. We have to recognize the fact that COVID is but one factor in the big systems of inequality, inequity, and a lack of access to, just global solutions. So realizing that, there are other issues such as other diseases and pandemics that, our nations have to fight with, economic conditions, intellectual property rights, that's a big issue, corruption. We cannot talk about development in Africa without talking about the, big elephant in the room. Corruption is a legit concern that we have to address, even when you're talking about the entrepreneurial process for people. And so, external players are looking at the key players across the continent, the rate of innovation and development, and, just at the end of the day, I'm all for solutions for Africans by Africans, because we happen to know our respective communities in a very unique way that external players don't. And so I would encourage folks to really capitalize that and to support your local entrepreneurs. We are quick to support everybody else but our own. And so at the end of the day, my big push is support your local entrepreneurs, support your young innovators coming up through the education system, teach them to think beyond the 3 acceptable, careers, engineering, doctor, or lawyer, right? Next. So in the big picture, the Africa, continental free trade area, that was a big push towards that, and it kind of helps level the playing field in the global market, understanding that, going digital is not an option in the technological advancement and development of Africa. E-commerce and e-money, right? Those have been some of the most constant news press updates I get. Internet access is a utility, not as a luxury. Infrastructure updates, we're talking transportation, medical facilities, affordable housing, and so on and so forth. Medical innovations, of course. And again, Afropolitics, we can't get away from the Afropolitics of it. Next. So when all this is said and done, my big question is always, who controls the narrative, right? Because historically, Africa's story has been told by others not from Africa. It's always been taught from a skewed lens of outsiders looking on and saying, oh, look at Africa, aren't they trying? And so at the end of the day, my thing is recognizing the role of media and the role of the changing dynamics of who speaks for Africa. And it is high time that we also, again, support, the Africa Engineering News, the Africa Communication Week, all the networks that are created to highlight the African perspectives, right? Because we, at the end of the day, we have to control the narrative, because that is what shapes of what external society and external media speaks about what's going on. So again, with that, personally, I, created HARP as well as African Engineering News. And, at the end of the day, I am all for, the long-term sustainability and resiliency of the people, the progress, and the culture. And so with that, next, I just want to thank y'all for this opportunity. If you want to reach out afterwards, feel free. That is my contact information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Winnie. I think you touched on some very important points, especially about us controlling the narrative and us supporting each other. I think those are important themes that really run across anything that we can speak about when we speak about our experience as Africans in the diaspora or Africans on the continent. As we get prepared to ask a few more questions to our panelists, I just want to make sure that everyone knows that if you have a question, we have the Q&A where you can type your question in. We would love to pose any of the questions that you have to any of our panelists. But as we do that, I want to speak to the panelists and ask you about, we've talked about your background. I've read some of your bios. Your bios are very, very hefty. You have some great accomplishments and great things that you've done, as well as what you're currently doing. But can you talk to me about the future? What problem in 5 years from now would you like to be involved in solving? Darlington.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess for me, what I like to be solving 5 years from now is still very much connected to what I'm solving now. I don't think the problems we are working on would magically be fixed before 5 years is over. So in 5 years, what I'm hoping that we'll be able to do is that we'll be able to boost the healthcare sector in Africa. So African healthcare sector, boost its capacity with AI, as well as other digital tools, so that we can be able to truly give healthcare access to people on the continent. And then beyond that, so just taking what we are doing and then truly scaling it across Africa and then beyond, because other regions that also very much need such solutions. But then on the tech side itself, I want us to be able to expand to cover a whole lot more conditions, to the extent that this wouldn't happen in 5 years, but what we are working towards in the healthcare side is basically healthcare without hospitals, if you will. So healthcare that is in real time and is with you on the go. So at some point, to even looking at things like nanotechnology, so nanites that can be working within your system, collecting data, analyzing that data, detecting problems with AI, and then responding to them accordingly. So far, we've actually done some research where we worked on, it was mainly regenerative medicine. So we're working on fibers these were nanofibers. We've also been doing a little with biotechnology. So that is the long-term goal for @minohealth, which would go way beyond the 5 years. In agriculture, we are expected to produce 60%. Africa is expected to increase its food production by 60% in less than 10 years to meet the growing population. So what we would like to do is we would like to help plant breeders develop a whole lot of varieties across all the main crops that we produce in Africa, both the ones that we consume and then the ones that are cash crops. So we want to help them produce varieties that are giving 10x, 20x improvement in yield. But also we want to help about 40% of crop yield is also lost due to diseases and pests. Fall armyworm is still a major issue. So we want to be able to scale what we are doing to the extent that farmers, regardless of size, so there are a lot of small scale farmers, we need to take this technology and make it very much accessible to small scale farmer in the remotest region to still be able to improve their on-farm productivity with this very high-end technologies, but it should be done in a very affordable and accessible way. So yeah, in 5 years, that is what I'm hoping that we'll be able to do. I would like for our solutions to become a common name across the continent and beyond, where it's a no-brainer to use AI in healthcare, because what else would you do? It's a no-brainer to use AI in precision agriculture when farming, because without it, then you are basically not going to get enough yield. So yeah, I think that's my goal for 5 years.
Wow. I really like your answer. And I like how you said healthcare without hospitals. I think that's a novel idea, and that's an amazing look at what could be. And the one thing that I think touches me most about your work, as well as the work of all of the panelists, is that the future that you imagine is not the past of the US or the past of the West. It's not about catching up to what is happening anywhere else on the globe. It's about improving the life of Africans in Africa. And so I think that's amazing, amazing way to look at it. Nneile, how would you frame what you want your impact to be within 5-10 years from now?
We always say within 5 years is a very short time. It will be 5 years very soon. But let's look at 10 years. We want to have built a Facebook for livestock globally, for us to be able to detect movement of livestock. We want to also make sure that farmers across the continent have identification and ownership of all their livestock, because identification and ownership is still a huge challenge on the continent. And one thing that we'd want to see is to get more banks taking their bets on livestock farmers. I mean, in 10 years' time, if we have banks building a focus on livestock agriculture and being able to provide credit to livestock farmers, that is what we'd want to see. And also an easy transition from farm to market for a lot of livestock farmers, because we haven't seen that happening quite a lot, especially within export market for smallholder farmers, for them to behave as commercial farmers despite the size of their farms.
Thank you. And within that vision of detecting the movement of livestock, IDing livestock, being able to bank on livestock, is that a South Africa vision? Is that an Africa vision? Is that a global vision?
We're looking at it as a global vision, because part of what we have also been working on, we've not just been doing work in South Africa only, Botswana, Lesotho. We've also been doing work in the US, mainly with farmers in California. So we see that there is a huge gap on how to create global traceability of livestock. So we want to build that pipeline for a global traceability of livestock. That's why we say we want to create more of a Facebook for animal, where there's identification of every animal and we can track its movement.
Wow. Facebook for animals. I gotta write that down. That's a good one. Okay. And I like how your vision is not just a local vision. It's not a regional vision. It's a global vision that's being produced locally for the world. And I think that really takes us to a whole new frame of thinking. The first level is, how can we meet the needs of our communities in Africa? But a bigger vision is, how can we meet the needs of the world through the innovation, the talent, the resources, and the ingenuity and the execution that we have on the ground in Africa? How can we export those solutions to a global marketplace? Kind of speaking on those lines, Wainright, can you tell us a little bit about what is your vision? What do you hope to be the impact of your work?
Thank you. That's a big question, actually. And I think what I would say first is that it took us decades, if not centuries, to, get indulged into the kind of systemic challenges we're faced with now. And along those period, I think it took intentional efforts of our leaders and people who were in authority to really destroy the system, to make bad decisions that got us into where we are right now. And if we must really, become, if we must leave this current state of where we are now to create the environment where, these ideas and innovations are thriving and they're creating ripple effects, then it's going to take us intentional efforts, like what every other panelist here and, people, the proliferation of so many great ideas across the continent now will definitely help to transition us to that period. And so, especially when it comes to education, is really it's an effort that seeks long-term impact. And so, but in 5 years, what I really hope that we can start to imagine really will be, how do we democratize entrepreneur and digital literacy education in secondary schools. um, Across Liberia and other African countries right now, they're not, there are just very few schools that are really teaching students 21st century skills. And so in 5 years, what we want to do is really creating a framework wherein nearly, as many targeted high schools across the country and other neighboring countries like Sierra Leone and Ghana can start to teach students entrepreneurship. How do you cultivate that entrepreneur mindset for young students from that really young age? And so we start to see young students leaving high school and launching their own entrepreneurial ventures, to give them the experiences to contribute to the innovation capacity of these different countries. And secondly, just ensuring that they are also teaching digital literacy, right? Darlington has talked a lot about AI. Nneile has talked about the tech, initiative that they're doing there. But how do we ensure that we're not stopping at these people, but we're creating more of these young people who are having ideas and going after them, but having the resources, as you earlier mentioned, Oche. And then secondly is we want to create an employment incubator, basically a workforce incubator for high schools, by ensuring that these students go to high school, but they have a space where they are testing their ideas. They're going to do market research. They're testing with customers and just they're having different creation and inventions, based on everyday problems that they see in their different communities and finding solutions to it. So we're hoping that that incubator will already provide the resources and the platform, the equipment, all the tools that they would need to really just go up ahead and test different crazy ideas and make sure that these can definitely be realities for their communities as well. And I think another thing we want to do is really ensuring that we are informing different policies around education and entrepreneur education across our country and just like the sub-region of West Africa, basically. Right now, I think there's a lot of knowledge gap when it comes to workforce development, when it comes to entrepreneur education and digital literacy, and that cuts across so many different sectors. But I think firmly is the fact that because the education is not contributing enough to that knowledge base of how do we utilize this insight to create different solutions for these different problems that we see. And so at Tribe, what we want to do is really create, research consultancy that is, definitely on the ground and have closer proximity to all of these problems that we see every day, and ensuring that we're informing policymakers, we're informing development institutions, and we're informing schools and just every stakeholder about, the challenges that exist, but as well as the opportunity and what kind of interventions that we need to create and ensure that we are bridging the gap between where we are now and where we want to be in the next many years. But I think these might not be done in 5 years, but definitely I'm hoping that by the fifth year after today, we can start to see the foundation or, sort of the growth of some of these ideas. And in the next 10, 15 years, we can actually realize them. So that's what I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wainright. I think you touch on some very important points. Globally, what is taught in schools is not necessarily what is helpful for people to start their own companies. Sometimes what's taught in schools will make them very successful at being employees. And then many more times, what they're taught in school doesn't even make them good employees either. And we see that in many places around the globe, but nowhere do we see it more often than we see it on the continent, where we have young people graduating, but the education and the skills that they have don't match the needs of the job market that will allow them to make a living on their own. And so I think it is very important, as you say, to teach those 21st century skills. Thank you for sharing your vision. And I hope that all of the visions that have been explained come to fruition. And we have some people who are starting to put some questions in the question and answer. We have a question is, Africans need to collaborate more. What initiatives and sectors do you think will encourage this? Second, we still have a massive population of youth that whose thinking needs to be activated for homegrown development and building Africa. What are your thoughts on reaching this large population? And I know that Winnie expressed interest in that question and want to answer. Would you like to tackle that, Winnie?
Sure. Yes. That first of all, that's a really good question. Understanding the fact that we do need to be intentional about how we support these initiatives. And the first one I would say is look at who is taking on that challenge to begin with, because there are in doing the work for over the years that I've been doing it, I've realized there are actually a whole bunch of other fellow Africans, both in the continent and throughout the diaspora, who are already doing the work, who are already prioritizing, changing the narrative, or rather controlling the narrative so that it is effectively, told to the world outside, but not just to the world outside, but also back to us as Africans. I think the second part of it also was, how do we then change that mindset locally? Because oftentimes I feel like we're trying to convince everybody else that we're great. And the first person who really needs to be convinced is us as Africans, is that we are great, that we come from greatness, that our history is great. And first of all, even when we talk about the education aspect, right, it comes back to, you have to start it from the education system. You have to support for the students from when they're young, right? Oftentimes, we see playtime being cut down. No, increase that creativity period for students, encourage them to think outside the box. If you see your child is taking an interest in something outside of the usual STEM, encourage them to do that, because that's where their passion is leading them to, right? Because even when as I read about innovators and inventions, it's always somebody seeing a need that affected them personally, or something that like triggered them personally, that they're like, I think I can do something for that. Like for me with HARP, it was, I personally can't stand harassment, street harassment, which I get a lot. And I was like, what's missing in this equation? Data. And more importantly, contextual data. And this is an issue that it's a global issue, right? And it's become a nuanced conversation. And that's how the African transition is going to be. Support those who are already doing the work of prioritizing the African narrative from our own perspectives. Enough of the Western media, first of all, downplaying when we are doing great things. Step one, I think we really need to call that out more often. With the fact that African innovators and African inventions are oftentimes downplayed by the general mass media, right? Looked at as, oh, that's a cute little thing Africa is doing. I'm like, nah, fam. If you look at the COVID rates, I mean, yes, I'm sure that we have, testing issues and all that stuff. But if you look at the rates and just how proactively the African nations have opted to treat and empower the communities to fight against it, yeah, like we need to, highlight that. We need to highlight how, the continent as a whole has pivoted in the response action. And also even when we look at e-commerce, right? Shifting a lot of the industry to e-commerce, which has actually helped a lot of the informal sector people, because a lot of people are doing the M-Pesa, the mobile money, right? I mean, Africa had that running very efficiently. I can speak for Kenya. They had it running efficiently years before America did. So, and as you said before, it's not just about looking at how the Western world did things and copying. It's not a copy and paste. It is a, hey, we see what you did there. We have access to the tools that helped you get there. So how do we make it work for our culture? Because there's always a cultural context to these things, right? I mean, West Africa and Central Africa is different from East Africa, it's different from South Africa. And we have to provide context savvy solutions so that people, A, stay engaged, and B, stay motivated to keep innovating, even as, we bring new generations of innovators. So that's the long answer. Support those who are doing the work and be proactive about, telling other people like, hey, this person is doing the work, support them. It really comes down to that.
Thank you. I think you touched on a number of different topics. And what I like to do right now is just open it up to all our panelists for anything that you want to add to the discussion. This is kind of our free discussion time. I won't pose the question directly to you, but if there's anything that you have to add, I think that Winnie, you touched on some of the topics that even Nneile spoke about when she talked about the solutions that she's developing being global solutions, as well as Darlington, that there's a global context for these for these solutions that are developed to attack local problems, and also us controlling the narrative of how we speak about our problems and how we speak about our solutions as well. I think those are very poignant points that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to.
Absolutely. And sorry, quick tag on that. The other thing I have to mention is the story of the traditional medicines, right? Especially throughout COVID and everything, and even with other issues, doing codifying and evaluating it with the standards in comparison to how it actually performs with other, medical approaches. I mean, that's one of the things that I'm seeing trending in this innovative tech transition, is seeing how do we marry, traditional remedies and, keeping what works and adjusting what doesn't, and shaping the narrative of how then that is viewed by external players. Yeah.
Absolutely. Is there anything anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think basically for me, what I say is that several great innovations, several great ideas. One thing I've learned over the past, few years is that as we really develop all of this technology and all these different great ideas, and I think it was Nneile who stressed on this point, is that how do we create, solutions that are, of course, contextual, local context to the specific problems? Because most times we get too excited about the great innovations, great ideas. But what I see with, again, the proliferation of all the great innovations that we have right now is that, are they really addressing the crucial problems, the root causes? And are they in context? Are they really relevant to the communities that we're trying to serve? And so that is one thing I think, we need to think about as we go about thinking, how do we solve these different problems that are faced with, the continent and for the people specifically. And then the second thing is really, we need to ensure that these are people-driven. I know we often talk about, design-driven, data-driven, but if we design all these great ideas and great solutions that, of course, not relevant to the people for whom they are created, then I think there's sort of a mismatch there. And it's almost like educating students for a workforce that really doesn't exist anymore. And that is something that we have to constantly keep evolving, iterating over the time. So I think it was a really great interaction. And thank you so much for the session.
We have another question from our viewers. I believe Africans in the diaspora can play a role in contributing to the economic and educational growth of the continent. How can Africans in the diaspora get plugged into these different areas of interest or areas of strengths where they can contribute? And I'll leave that open to anybody.
May I?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I wanted to give opportunity for somebody else to talk, but yes, and actually for me, that is a keen thing that I've been having the conversation with a bunch of my friends, is that we do have a lot of Africans throughout the diaspora. We have to first of all acknowledge that, right? And not just Africans who came directly from Africa. We have first generation, second generation, and so forth. And it's also, I think, goes back to defining, well, how do we define who are Africans throughout the diaspora? That could get complicated. But at the end of the day, it's people who are for the nation, for the support and the empowerment and uplifting of the indigenous folks as well, right? Because oftentimes they're the ones missing from the decision-making tables, right? And so being able to make sure that the people, a simple Google search, right? Or, attending, webinars such as this, like I have found some of the most interesting, innovators, just, doing my research for the African Engineering News. And so, and attending, conferences and webinars such as this. And fam, if you know one African person in the diaspora, you trust me, you know a whole tribe. So first and foremost, we have to be big upping our people. It really comes down to that. If you know something, say it. Share information is so powerful, like at the end of the day, information is powerful, and being able to share that. I'm big on like sharing on my social media, like if it's scholarships, if it's something really cool happening, in the continent, even though I don't live there, for the majority of the year, I travel there quite consistently, and I am very intentional about staying updated on what's going on back home, because bam, like that's where it is. Like and even just if you see at how external investors are, kind of moving about throughout Africa, it's to me, it's really saddening when I see that our own people don't see that and don't recognize the value of truly like being intentional about investing in the continent, because everybody else is coming and taking a piece of it except us. So yeah, share the information and support the work that's being done.
I think you made some valid points. Go ahead, Darlington.
Yeah, so to add to the amazing points that Winnie made, yeah, I very much agree. I think just first of all, knowing what is happening, it's both ways. So knowing what is happening in Africa, and then those in Africa knowing what is happening as far as Africans outside of Africa. Like I just found out literally few days ago that Calendly, a very popular platform that we all use for scheduling appointments, is actually the founder is a Nigerian American, if you will. So, and he just managed to get over 3 billion valuation, raising 250 million. So this is big news to be celebrated by the African diaspora as well as Africans. But when I shared this, it was amazing that literally almost no one else knew this, including myself, until a few days ago. So it's very much unfortunate that we really don't know that we have Africans both in Africa and then out and then beyond the continent that are very active and doing a lot of amazing stuff. But there are also communities that are coming up that are trying to bridge the gap. So participating in these communities is very essential.
We did have a question directly to Wainright. And the question was, what's an unfortunate pattern that you see in the education system? What are the common skills that you see that may not be so common?
Sorry, I didn't get the second part of the question.
So what is a common skill that you see that needs to be in students, but you don't see it commonly in students in Africa?
Right. Yeah, sure. I think based on our research and experiences over the past 2 years, a common trend that we've seen is that education continues to fail African students. That's sort of, a big problem we've experienced. And so these students graduate from high schools, from universities, and they're ill prepared to really succeed in the workforce. And by succeeding means either being matched, effectively with employment, or creating innovations or interventions that are sustained over a long period of time. And so that is a trend.
What skills do you see that they're missing?
Yeah, so I think right now, because so every time, of course, the skills keep changing over time. More generally, of course, we need to ensure that students are more entrepreneur and students are, more digital literate. And really depending on what the current trend of the workforce is appealing towards is something that we've seen. But I think most specifically what needs to happen is that we overlook the soft skills most of the time. Things like growth mindset, right? Things like creative thinking, things like problem solving, critical thinking. These are skills that students need to learn, because I tell you what, you can learn AI, right? And the different ways to utilize it now. A few years from now, there might be another technology that is introduced, and you have to really transition to ensure that you're currently adapting to the new wave of how technology is driving change and interventions across the world and even your local context. And so by primarily teaching young students, things like critical thinking, problem solving, the growth mindset, how do you adapt to, the change? How do you adapt to career changes? You're equipping them with, the skills and the tools to really thrive. I think the goal here is really ensuring that how can people thrive in whatever the uncertainties are. I think COVID has already demonstrated enough that, there is nothing that's certain. Things are constantly going to change. Who thought that, remote work was going to be a thing, so broadly advanced in this current dispensation? We never knew that. And so these are always going to constantly change. Whether you're a data analyst, there might be a time that you have to evolve and get to really improve yourself. But by really teaching the core values and these core principles and these core soft skills, we can already ensure that these students are growing and they are more open towards just navigating whatever these uncertainties are. But not forgetting, of course, that we need to equip them also with sort of the technical skills they need to ensure that they're utilizing these soft skills that we're teaching them. So that's something that we've seen over the last few years.
Thank you, Wainright. Another
Just,
question. Oh yeah.
I just wanted to add on what Wayne said. One of the things that we had seen over the years is that, I mean, in the US, you don't see it happening quite a lot. It's starting to change. Is that education, especially at higher education institutions at university, is more of the box education, where you find a young person studying engineering is purely doing technical courses, whereas in some places in the US, you'd find that I would be studying mechanical engineering and still able to study economics and have to study psychology. So we sort of don't have to box education, and we need to allow at universities young people to be curious and learn anything and everything about the world and the skills that they believe they want to learn. That answers a lot of the questions, or gets to answer the curious things that they have around the world. So we need to allow universities to do that. I mean, if young people want to do a 6-month course in economics, we need to allow them to do that. If there are the other 6 months I want to do computer science, allow me to do that without the need for me to do a 4-year course that might just be giving me 25% of what I need, and the rest is just me having to be in class all the time. We need to create such kind of universities. And I mean, we've seen that happening quite a lot with Udemy. The reason why Udemy is growing quite a lot is because a lot of people are starting to do 6 months learning something as a critical skill they want to learn and applying it as quick as possible, learning another critical skill and applying it as quick as possible. So we need to remodel our education in that way that allows people to learn as quick as possible and apply as quick as possible.
Thank you.
I think just in 30 seconds, I would just add that a very crucial skill that we need to teach students is really learning how to learn. That is really important. I think that is something I would just really close on at this point.
Wow, you dropped quite a few nuggets. You dropped the growth mindset, critical thinking, being adaptable to change, and learning how to learn. I think those are all good takeaways for us. And when I have one more question as we wrap up that I have for everybody, but I like to do a quick recap of what you see the future being. What you all have told me that you see the future being is in the 21st century that students will be able to get the skills that they need to be entrepreneurs and to be able to operate effectively in the workforce. That you would like to see healthcare without hospitals, the ability to use nanotechnology to promote healing. You would like to see a Facebook of livestock where we are able to identify individual pieces of livestock throughout the global context, to be able to detect the movement of livestock and to be able to provide banking solutions for from farm to table. You would also like to see us be able to control our narrative and us to be able to collaborate more. So within all that, what I would ask you, there's the easy question I ask, what are the struggles that you've had to get to where you are? That's an easy one. But what I think may be even more beneficial to everyone that's on the line now is, what is one thing that you think that helped you the most in getting to where you are now? That may have been a person who has been instrumental in your development in your path, or it may be a program, it may be a resource or a solution that you have utilized that have helped you to acquire the amount of success that you've had. It looks like you want to say something, Nneile.
I think for me, it's open source tech. It helped me get to where I am because you would know previously, some years back, tech was not open source, quite expensive, but for now it's like open source tech. And I truly believe if we make things open source, if we make education accessible, Google has been one of my greatest enablers, because me having to jump onto Google to get something and all the knowledge, and all the people doing YouTube channels sharing all the knowledge they have, it's just helped me get to where I am. That's why I love what Wayne said, learning to learn. I've been applying that.
Wow. Wow. Google and YouTube. I heard that.
Yeah. I think for me, a very sexy appeal to this question would be that, I've worked so hard and been dedicated and ready, pursue dreams. But that would be untrue and incomplete actually. And because if I look back 10, 15, 20 years from now, I would never have imagined that I would be here anytime talking about how do we create, a new generation of young entrepreneurs and innovators. But I think, and oftentimes the work we do, I think is really cool. I think so, based on the amazing people we work with. But never have I thought that I'm one of the smartest or hardworking people, especially from my country, Liberia. If you went to Liberia, the number of amazing young people you see with brilliant ideas and good talent and skills that are there, you can't comprehend, that the magnitude of how that is. But unfortunately, resources and opportunities have not been equally distributed to these young people. And so I think I feel very blessed and very privileged, among all these young people to have had people from high school who said that, let me mentor you. And I think mentorship for me was a key to my growth over the period of time. And over the years, that has been instrumental into my growth and my development. Mentorship and just people who thought that, well, I think, let me make you see beyond your horizon and the box you're creating. Especially
And
going to
I'm
on a
actually
previous.
going to lean in
Yeah.
on that a little bit, Wayne. Who was that mentor
Yeah.
that impacted you? Just one of your mentors that really
Yeah.
left a big impression on you.
So my mentor, Mahmoud Korma, he started mentoring from high school. He still is my primary mentor, and we've become family now. And he really told me that, because when I first started my career, I was working, on a program with the UN, and I was so excited because I was in high school, I was earning paychecks, and I was, on the radio all the time among my friends. And he said, well, this is really exciting. You're doing great work, but I think you have, a bigger potential. And I don't want you to limit yourself to the scope of what you're currently doing. I want you to really expand your horizon and think beyond, what you could do for not only yourself, but many other young people in the country. And so I think that was the first time I had heard the word mentorship. And I said, well, I don't know what this is, but we can explore it. And I think that, looking back now, that was one of the greatest blessings of my life personally.
Wow.
And that was the turning point for me. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I think that has been sort of a really major part of the work we do at Tribe, ensuring that even though we are creating all the solutions we want, but how do we ensure that we are providing the environment where these young people are being mentored and equipped with all the resources, the skills, and the human capital and the human capacity to really thrive in whatever they decide to do.
Absolutely. And shout out to your mentor. You said it was Mahmoud Korma?
Mahmoud Koroma, yeah.
Karuma. Shout out to Mahmoud Karuma. All right, Darlington, what about you?
Yeah, it'll be hard to follow up with all those amazing answers. I don't think I can pinpoint it to a single thing, but it's in part a number of things that have also been mentioned. So the internet has basically been responsible for maybe everything that I am, based on the fact that, so I decided not to take any university course, nothing. So yeah, I never studied in a university, and I managed to get to who I am entirely because I studied on the internet. So to the extent I actually became a lecturer in the university where I taught AI in one of the universities in Ghana, and then I do work in research. So starting from nothing to who I am is entirely because literally anything I wanted to learn, even more so than maybe a bachelor's degree, was on the internet. And then I'm now able to do this at a very high level, which is still an ongoing process. I'm literally always learning and reading from the internet. So that has been beneficial. But also, I can pinpoint it to one person that probably changed my trajectory at a very early age, kind of like Wainright. So in my case, I was age 13, 14. And then there was this person who was much older, And then we became friends. And then he mentioned the fact that when he was younger, he loved gaming so much that he decided to learn how to build his own games. And then I said, well, you can do that. Like, doesn't that require a whole lot of infrastructure? And it's like, no, you use programming languages. And I said, oh, that's crazy. So how do you go about this programming languages? So he gave me some books. The fact that he thought giving these big books to a 13-year-old boy, he trusted that I could actually understand what was in the books, and he took that chance with me, gave me the book. So the first time I came in contact with programming language was HTML, and he told me this is a good place to start. And literally, this book had probably 150 pages or something, or even more. But because that experience changed my life, I was able to go through basically the entire book at one go before the next day. It felt like this was a magical world that I just discovered. You can write some lines of code and then something happens. So it changed everything. And then right there, I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And so before I even went to senior high school, I was already writing about 5 or 10 different programming languages. So that is why I drew the conclusion that, I don't think I want to go to a university anymore, because whilst in senior high school, I started actually getting projects to develop websites and then apps for people. So I knew exactly what I wanted to do. But then I knew I was extremely passionate about AI. And then I decided that I want to move, so programming, but then heading towards AI. So I started looking into it. But then before then, deep learning was not a thing. So there's this whole space called symbolic AI, which was quite boring to me at that point. But once I became passionate about solving a problem, so that's another thing that has extremely been helpful. Once you identify a problem that bothers you a whole lot and you become extremely obsessed with that problem, it will drive you to become whatever you need to become to solve that problem. So I had no background in healthcare. At that point, I did not even know AI from a technical level. But then once I knew that, okay, these are the issues plaguing African healthcare, and to be able to solve them, I'll need AI. I literally studied and read anything I could find on AI. And then I started studying deep learning. So I studied deep learning off of the internet. But yeah, it's been a whole hellish journey from what I'm saying from that point up to where we are now. But yeah, so if I had to tailor it down to be three things, the first one would be the internet. The second one would be the individual, who would just a few interaction money to change my trajectory. And then the third one was discovering a problem that I became very much obsessed about.
Thank you for sharing. And we might as well, Winnie, what would be the thing that you think has set you on the trajectory that you are on?
I would ditto on everybody else's in terms of having a proper, mentor or somebody who sees the greater potential in you and calls that out, number one. But also like really the string that looking back that has been present all along is being open to opportunity, saying yes to opportunity when it's presented. Because oftentimes, and especially like, being Black, being a woman in STEM, oftentimes we're quick to be like, am I really the best person to answer that? Or am I really good enough? Do I know enough about this? We're quick to misjudge ourselves or think we're not enough, right? And being able to say yes to opportunity, even when you're like, I think I might have to do some homework on that, but I'll get you an answer. So yeah, I'll just say, if you're out there and if there's something that bugs you enough that keeps you up, go for it. Say yeah, and once you begin to take that step, life will align itself for you. So it may take a minute, but be willing to say yes to the opportunities that come to you. Yeah,
that's right. Be willing to say yes. Use the internet. Google can be your best friend.
Yes.
YouTube can be your best friend. Get a mentor. Another thing might be good is if you got a mentor, listen to them. They might be able to help you out if you listen to your mentor, and just be willing to go and get the knowledge. If you don't, if you can't get it through a school or a formal form of education, sometimes you got to find a way to get the knowledge and find a problem that you are really passionate about, and let that guide you on your journey. So with that, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, all of our speakers today for joining us for this lively conversation about innovation in Africa and the great projects that you are working on. I want to continue following your work and learning from the things that you are doing. We're about to turn it over to DOWA, but before that, I just want to call out to the people who put questions in the question and answer. Jayola, Titiloye, Salma Moran. I want to thank both of you for putting questions in our question and answer, and keeping our conversation lively today. And I also want to thank DOWA, Doing Good Work in Africa, for joining this meeting for us today. And with that, I'll turn it over to Nneile.
Thank you so much, Casey. Thank you so much to all our panelists. You guys have made this a very enlightening, informative, and engaging session. You know, I've just listening to the back and forth between you guys, and it's just been so great. Thank you so much for engaging with us with this topic. And thank you so much, Casey, for leading this with us. I mean, we've heard a lot today. Casey, you know, some minutes ago, tried to put some comments around his key takeaways. And then just after that, you know, we got other takeaways. You know, initially I was going with the Facebook for animals. I was like, you know, you heard that first here. And then all of a sudden, you know, I heard other things, you know, learning how to learn. And then Darlington just blew everybody's mind by saying that he learned about artificial intelligence just using the internet. He didn't go through formal education. And, you know, you would think that a topic as complex as artificial intelligence, you want to be somewhere sitting in, you know, some Ivy League college, learning everything, engaging with people. But at the end of the day, you know, what we're hearing is technology is available to a lot of us. As Winnie said earlier on, Facebook is pushing this idea of providing the infrastructure to enable technology across the continent. And it's about how we use that technology. We at DOWA, we're trying to connect students in the United States to African organizations doing good work. So everything that Tribe is doing, everything that Darlington is doing with artificial intelligence, everything that Nneile is doing with, you know, med tech and doing with IDMO, you know, just thinking about how moving from the technology that we're using, that she was talking about for sports and people, and then trying to use that infrared in the same space, in a different space, you know, for animals, different things. The ideas are there. The problems are ours. The solutions have to be ours. And it's about how we take what is out there to enable ourselves, to empower ourselves. There's a lot about, you know, coming into the continent and doing different things. But the idea is, how are we using technology and innovation to transform the market, to create and transform the market, to really change people's lives? And we need to do this using really sustainable means. We can't just come up with, you know, a solution to one thing and then walk away and it doesn't really change things. So we need to look at how we do that. And if you think about some of the things we've heard today, you know, just remind yourself, we need to innovate, we need to connect, we need to engage, we need to collaborate, and we need to nurture talent. And in doing that, we need to tell our stories as well. We cannot do this without telling our own stories. And I will add that also that, you know, the aspect of Africans investing in Africa is just as important, because we see a lot of money. The example currently that I think it was Darlington who mentioned it earlier on, the example that Darlington gave, you know, a couple of months ago, we were all talking about Paystack. Currently, Paystack, it's about African money, you know, investing in Africa, because now these guys are getting money from foreign investors. But by the time we start to talk about our stories and investing our own technologies, things will begin to transform. I would just say again, thank you everyone, Casey, Winnie, Darlington, Nneile, and Wainright, for participating, for speaking, for moderating, And to all our attendees, thank you so much for joining us. We will continue the conversation. I think there's so much we've heard today, and a lot of people want to carry on this conversation. I just want to say that we are going to continue with our webinars. The next one is actually about venture capital investment, for example, and we want to be able to engage with everyone on that. So please look out for our emails about the next webinars coming up, and also engage with us in different ways. We are so lucky to have had, great speakers today and attendees who joined us today. So again, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.